Right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a very exclusive and novel session that we're going to be doing on the road to partner in management consulting. So I have with us Jad Bitar from BCG and Javier Herrera from Kearney. And really grateful that you're joining us, guys. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So for those of you that don't know Sarwa, we're an investment platform, and you might be wondering, why is Sarwa, BCG, and Kearney teaming up? What's the goal of the session? So I want to start with introducing why we're really excited about this specific one. The reason for that is that, we've been hammering the point that investing is a very important wealth creation tool, but so is career progression. And if you're happy in your job, if you're progressing well, that should be at the core of your financial strategy. And we always say that, and what we always notice is that in consulting, at least 10 years ago when I was graduating, it was the hardest, maybe it still is. I'd love to hear from you if you still that, but it was the hardest career on campus, and everyone was practicing case interviews, and it was quite difficult to get in. It's a very prestigious job. And I've noticed that there's a lot of content on helping you break into the industry, but not so much on what it takes to make it to partner. What are the challenges? What are the roadblocks? Why would you want to stay partner? What's the opportunity cost of leaving as you get offers? So we wanted to hear directly from partners in some of the top firms, to hear from them directly, and learn from the journey. So I've asked both Jad and Javier to be as unscripted as possible, as personal as possible. So don't treat this as either investment or career advice as much as draw inspiration from their journey. So without further ado, I'll get started. And I'd like to ask you each, if you can give your perspective, Jad and Javier, on what does it take to get to partner in consulting, and what are some of the misconceptions that associates make about the path to partner?
Javier, do you want to give it a try?
Sure, Jad. Maybe before I give a quick introduction about myself, my name is Javier. I'm from Argentina. I had the pleasure, though, of living around the world. I have lived, I think, in almost every continent by now. And I, as Mark said, studied industrial engineering. Right after joined consulting with the idea of trying to see multiple industries, different ideas, different companies. And very early on, my plan was in less than 2 years, finding what I like and very quickly move to the industry. That was 12 years ago. I'm still in consulting. And I think, unlike Jad, I'm still what I call a new partner. I met partner 2 years ago. And it's been a great journey. I think, Mark, to your point, some of the misconceptions, I would say, I'll try to summarize it from my perspective across three. The first one is going into the partnership is a journey, it's not a destination. Once you make it to partner, it doesn't stop there. There are so many new things, so many new learnings, and so many different things that you're seeing there. I think the second one, it's a little bit about the idea that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I know we listen to this advice on daily basis, no? It doesn't matter whether you get promoted now, 6 months later. And we're all going in our cohorts and we want to go fast. Nothing changes. At the end, this is a long career. And I think really being able to enjoy it as you go through it, it's important. I think COVID for me in this context was an eye-opening. And the third one, for me, it's about learning. Every day you keep learning. You keep getting yourself out of your comfort zone. It doesn't mean that because you made partner, you're done. Nothing new will change or nothing will come up. At least in my experience, every day you keep learning, and you keep learning about new things, no? Maybe when you were a business analyst, you were like learning about how to model in Excel, or like how to like build like PowerPoints, and like what you start like learning on like different things and like different skills. But every day I think it's a new learning. I'll pass it to you, Jad. I hope like we again, as you have like significantly more experience in the partnership, we'll see whether our answers like reconcile.
No, it's an inverse parabola. So at one point you start going back down, and I'm on my slope down. So we will meet, don't worry. No, but to go back to Mark's question, look, I think something we say at BCG is very important is we say one BCG, many path. There is no one way to make it to partner. Within BCG, and I think in any other company, you are who you are. And what is interesting in consulting, and especially with the partners, is that they're very different, and the paths that they have followed are very different. So you'll get different answers from different individuals. But my take on this is that once you remove the glamorous veneer of consulting that people looking from the outside and say, what a glorious profession, there is a huge dark side to consulting that we like to forget about. And I think once you're in, it becomes very, very present. So if you want to sustain this, I think passion for me was very important. I'm passionate about solving problems. I'm passionate about impact. I'm passionate about contributing. So passion was very important for me. 2, caring about yourself first, because if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to get burned very quickly, but also caring about the other, taking care of your teams, taking care of the support staff, taking care of your clients is very important. And the third one is creating value day in, day out. And this is the challenge, is how do you create value? You get paid so much as a consultant firm. You cannot just come back with platitude and generic solutions. You need to create value. So for me, these are the 3 axes that can take you from, I would say, entry to partner.
Awesome. I'm glad. It's nice to hear partners talk about the dark side as well, and not just show the rosy picture of the job. I imagine it's very stressful still, and it can get overwhelming. And I noticed, Jad, you have in your signature you mentioned mental health as a champion. I love that. So I want to hear from both of you, when it does get overwhelming or when you do lose focus, what do you do? What are questions maybe that you ask yourself to get back on track?
Let me give it a kick, and Javier, sorry for jumping in. Look, for me, it's a roller coaster. One week you think you are the master of the universe. The other week you feel like nothing. And it's this continuous roller coaster. It's not like you have 6 months of something and 6 months of the other. It's on a weekly basis, you're up and down. So I don't wait for me to get to the point that you're describing. For me, my weekends, more and more, I use them to replenish myself. And my trip is hiking, is being in nature. So I leave everything behind and I just go walk. And for me, this is very powerful to just reset everything, get rid of all of the negativity that I have accumulated during the week, and come back, I would say, refreshed. It's been working up till now. I don't know how long it will work, but it's been working until now.
Javier?
I fully agree with Jad on this one. It's a roller coaster, and it's unpredictable, and every day it's a new surprise, which I think it's also what makes it exciting. Otherwise, this at one point will be like, oh, what are we doing? I like to have what I would say a balanced routine. And in order to do that, I'm very strict about training 3-4 times a week at least. I try to really focus on my sleep, try to balance it. When I see that this like roller coaster comes and I start like predicting it, because at one point you start seeing like the patterns repeating. I also try to eat very healthy. I try to really control the variables I know that at least I have some sort of control on. That way, it allows me to perform a bit better, and then to be better in terms of like mental health and well-being.
Mhm.
At the firm, we are also actually pushing many of these topics in a way that we are trying to support our consultants across mental health and well-being. It's not easy, but if we, and I really like what you mentioned, Jad, we need to take care of ourselves. And if we don't prioritize ourselves first, no one will do.
Mhm. And you mentioned COVID being kind of unlocking a certain insight. Was that it? Was that blend of work and some of the habits that you're mentioning?
Well, for me, it was a bit different. I played semi-professional tennis and I used to run marathons. So I always care about I like the definition of the corporate athlete. I consider myself an athlete before consulting. And then when I joined consulting and I heard this concept of corporate athlete, no, like you need to train hard and you need to follow a strict like training regime in order like to perform better. It truly resonated. So all my career, I try to balance it. Again, I think that there are periods in your career that you will say, well, I don't know, you're about to go through a promotion and like maybe you need to stretch yourself a little bit more. And then it gets to a point that, okay, it gets more manageable and then you have more time. But even within those periods, for me, having a little bit of routine and like really focusing on being stable mentally and physically has, for me, been something very helpful.
Okay. And I want to understand, let's say I've been in consulting. It's been a few years. I got maybe one promotion to associate or manager, and industry start to get maybe some what we call an exit opportunities or alternative offers. What would you say is an advice that you would ignore for a new consultant that's evaluating their options to be a partner? Like what are some bad recommendation you hear in your area that I guess giving you a chance to call out as we've been giving quite a bit of advice so far. What is the flip side of that?
Sorry, Mark, you were
Like
breaking it. Yeah, go, Jad. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on this. One is a false assumption that the longer you stay, the higher your market value becomes. I think this is correct up to a point. And after, in my opinion, project leader, senior project leader, your value in the market will never catch up. And then you basically priced out yourself from leaving consulting. You became a prisoner. So for me, this is a false assumption. And I keep highlighting this to my teams. Look, I accept the fact that consulting is not for everyone and that 95% will use consulting as a springboard for something else. It's okay. But don't fall under the assumption that the longer you stay, the longer you're going to be able to extract value. At one point, you're out of the market. So if you want to jump out at the right time. That's the number one. Two, they seem to feel, again, I see it a lot, to believe that I need to affiliate with the right practice so I can find the right job in this industry. And I think also it's a fallacy. In consulting, you have this wider skill set. And I'm not saying that you could fit in the industry, but fundamentally, you're not an expert. You are more a manager. You're going to be achieving an executive role. So think more about the executive role you want to play rather than the industry you want to play. If you limit yourself to an industry, you're removing a lot of opportunities. So these are the two things that I think I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I'll bring one more of these ones. I think like sometimes many of us will fall into the trap that we're just thinking about what's next in the short term. And we forget a little bit to extract ourselves from the day to day and really pause for a second and really understand what we have achieved, where are we standing, and where do we want to head. I'll tell many of my mentees, you are your own chief strategy officer, no? We keep like working on with our clients on developing strategies for them, but sometimes we forget to strategize a little bit about our own careers. And having that long-term view, and again, long-term doesn't mean 10 years, especially in consulting, but at least understanding where do you want to head in the next 2-3 years becomes a bit easier. And to Jad's point, it also allows you to like manage your journey a bit better. There's no two people who have had a similar journey.
Mm-hmm. I think that would remove a lot of pressure from constantly reevaluating your options. I can relate to that. And what would you say is a failure that set you up for a later success? If you can share any point in your journey where at that point in time it looked like a failure, but turned out to be otherwise.
There are many of
can,
those.
yeah.
So go ahead.
It's I can say I had many of these ones, and like there are many weeks that I arrive home and I'm like, oh wow, what happened? And I think as you go through the ranks, what you define a failure at one point might then become a strength for the next one. I do remember being like early on in my career being an analyst, and then realizing that they had made some mistakes in some models, and then being like the entire night thinking and dreaming about it, and like really going through the Excel formulas while like dreaming, and then understanding what had happened. But I think what I realized or what I consider a failure that then became a strength was, I think it was like 5-6 years ago, almost during COVID, had the chance to take an assignment, an international assignment, and I was planning on relocating back to Europe. And at that point, like COVID wasn't allowing us for like international transfers. I ended up staying in Dubai a bit longer. And I was pretty frustrated. And I said, well, I failed at doing this. Like things weren't moving. I was like stuck in the Middle East. And then at one point after COVID, it's like kind of like the Middle East like recovered and opened faster than Europe, at least, especially the UAE. And suddenly I started seeing most of my friends from London coming to Dubai, moving to the region and being like, oh, how do I find a job here? And I realized I was so well positioned in where I were. But again, I think that those are things that happen. And the idea of being flexible and being looking for new challenges, it's always like encouraged in consulting.
That's super interesting. You were ahead of your time in spotting the Middle East's growth and forced to wait until it improves. That's very interesting. Jad?
Yeah, mine was a bit more hard. At one point, I moved to Silicon Valley and I joined a boutique consulting firm to help Fortune 100 get what the internet was about back then. And after a couple of years of just advising everybody on what to do with the internet, I said, like, come on, I should be jumping in, and enough of this, I'm missing the boat. So I left consulting and started a tech startup with a couple of ex-clients. And we spent 2 years spending all of what we had accumulated back then in this startup, dreaming that we will flip it for a few billions and then retire on a tropical island like everybody else. And then the dot-com boom, dot-com bust happened. And we, instead of just getting out and just understanding that this will not survive, I dragged it for another 2 years, which was miserable because not only I had depleted my reserve, but I started even getting into the red just to get it going. So back then it was a nightmare, not knowing when to stop, not knowing to say I failed. Now it's okay to accept the failure and get out. And at the end I had to get out because it was a wall. But then these years getting into this today, when I look at them, the lessons that I learned, the skills that I learned were invaluable. So if I go back to this moment, at that moment, I was just trying to find out a way out of this maze. I was just overwhelmed. I was losing everything. My whole world was collapsing around me. But when I look back now and say, wow, these were fantastic years, fantastic years. So again, I really want to highlight what Javier said before, is that in the moment, you might have a judgment, good or bad, on something, but with time, most probably you'll have a different perspective on it, either good or bad. So time has a different it's a different lens.
That's thanks for sharing, Jad. I can also imagine that, as you said, on time, when you go from more of a monthly cadence to the entrepreneurial world, it can be tough to know when to stop, and you don't have that set out for you eventually. So I can relate a lot to that. And in tech, I think the same misconception that applies in consulting, where you see the headline or you feel like this company just had an overnight success, is a long time in the making. I saw an article on NVIDIA 2 days ago that's the title said it all, which is 30 years in the making, an overnight success. So a lot of us maybe only recently found out about it in the last few years or weeks, but this is a 30-year-old journey to get to where it is today. I guess that's a good segue into maybe personal finance, because I think you started to mention that, Jad, on the impact on personal finance and our careers. And a lot of our thinking around Sarwa initially was that people are extremely busy, and some of the problems, it's easy to put that aside as a priority and focus on the client or the work at hand, to the point where Javier needs to come up with chief strategy officer for your life rather than just for your client. So I can relate to why you need to do that, because consultants, I think, are known to put that on the side. So I wanted to hear from you, what are your lessons learned in personal finance and in investing across your consulting career?
I go.
Go for it.
Let me start. Maybe I'll come up with like a few other ideas as I listen to Jad as well. So that's an interesting one. When I was young, my dad bought me a book. It was called Rich Dad, Rich
Dad, Poor Dad.
Poor Dad. And I read it, and I was pretty young. I don't know if I was like 10 years old or so. And I was like, oh, wow, this is enlightening. So you actually need to work, but you need to like save money, and then you need to make that money work for itself. So then you can ideally live from the interest that the savings will generate. And that was always there in my mind. And as like I started like growing a bit older, I started like, I always liked finances. And for me, finance and investments was a topic that was like always close to me. And I started investing, and I started like even picking stocks, no? And I still remember when I joined consulting, when I joined consulting, I was with BCG, and I still remember in Mexico City in the office, and I had like bought the stock from Apple, and I had like I think I bought the stock like it was like February or something like that, and suddenly the stock like started performing really bad, no? And I was like fully invested, and I didn't have a significant disposable income like to keep like reinvesting on it. And I like started like getting really anxious, no? And like for the next like couple of months, I was like really following up, and like on, I would say, hourly basis, if not daily basis. And at one point, the day that I broke even after so much stress, I was like, okay, I'm done with this. This doesn't work for me. Individual stocks and this profession, it doesn't work. I need to have a long-term view, and ETFs and this type of like products were always like a bit of a better idea for me. having said that, I know many friends who like to invest in direct stocks and direct equities. By the way, when I heard your idea, Mark, of like setting up Sarwa and really facilitating the journey for VC professionals, I thought it was a fantastic idea, no? Because like really making the investment process a bit easier. I can talk a little bit more about it later, but Jad, over to you.
Sure. Look, not only busy, but some of us are also ignorant. So talking about myself, when I started my career, I refused totally to invest, considering this some kind of ethical conundrum. Either I make money from my sweat or no way. And then in the late 90s, with the dot-com boom, all of my friends were making a lot of money from playing the stocks, and I was refusing until a professor that I respected a lot told me, Jad, you have to bet on Nortel. And I told him, look, I've never invested. I will never invest. He said, no. Go in. Nortel is going to explode. And most of you don't even know what Nortel is. Nortel was a great company back then. And I don't know what happened to me. I said, you know what? Since I'm going in, let me go in with everything on Nortel. And I think Nortel was waiting for me to come in to just start melting down. I had enough money to put a down payment for a house. I got out of Nortel with enough to invite my wife for dinner. And that was a lesson learned, that I'm an ignorant. I don't know what to do in this. Look, the same way you ask your client to trust you as a professional, you have to trust somebody as a professional. And since then, I don't do any investment decision. I have an advisor and I trust him fully and his team, and that's it. So
yeah,
some of us are ignorance.
no, there's a pattern. I think it's
Not only busy.
Yeah, but I get one thing I've been monitoring more, that I would encourage the audience as well, at least to know what kind of environment we are in, as a touch point, is the CNN Fear and Greed Index. I monitor it every now and then to see, beyond just the markets, what is the main emotion driving the market at the moment, so that you at least know if you are under the influence of the media or content or the story around you. But I think too many of us have the story of tasting maybe an early win in a stock, and sometimes we often say it's more dangerous to make money initially than to lose, because you feel like you're good at it, although nothing should back the amount of time or expertise you're spending on stock picking. So and I guess that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which is, what is one of the best or worst? So we started with the worst. Maybe we can, on the flip side, what is one of the best investments that you've made?
For me, only investment I've done outside of look, I'm exaggerating. I'm a sucker for startups. So whenever I have a founder or founding team approaching me, especially in the very early stages, I'm a sucker. I just cannot not help. And none of these panned out. All of them were just write-offs. So the best investment that I've ever had was something like this. I have a friend from Montreal, basically, when we were 18. He was on the artistic side of life. I was more on the business scientific side. So this guy calls me and says, Jad, I'm heading to Portugal to start up a business, and I would like you to invest in it. I said, like, what the hell do you know about business, and what the hell do you know about Portugal? Like, what is taking you there? And he said, look, we have a great idea, and I'm going to do self-storage, because I've did an analysis and there is almost no self-storage in Portugal, and it's bound to work. I said, are you crazy? This is not how things work. Where is the demand? And, bring in your whole consulting framework. And then he said, you know what? He's a friend. You've helped strangers. Go in. And up till today, I still regret not having invested much more. It started as a very, I would say, basic business plan. And today, Kubo is a fantastic Pyramid said it's in year 6. They have now 5 locations. It's booming. It's exploding. And I keep saying to myself, why didn't I put more? So for me, Kubu was the best investment up till now.
Interesting. I like that you pointed out how consulting can really serve you, but sometimes also I remember in my own journey and so I had to unlearn some of the things that we, including the level of how things are formatted or look, the level of quality in terms of the deliverables that have to be significantly dropped to meet some timeline. So there's a lot of there's a lot of these as well. Javier.
So I would say, unlike Jad, I haven't been that successful when it comes to investments. I think some of the best investments have been finding really the right advisors to make these investments and the right people to channel these investments. I typically do not make individual specific investments in a company and so on. So I invest with in experts in different fields, either it's real estate or, like, for instance, I now invested in some VC as an LP that they give us an option to invest with like smaller ticket sizes. What I do enjoy is like suddenly receiving a newsletter, a quarterly newsletter, or like opening the bank accounts and like seeing how like things like keep going up. And I would say those were good investments. But honestly, every time I try to cherry pick individual stocks or like really try to partner with someone and do specific deals, they haven't been the most successful ones, let me put it like that.
I get you. I think it's nice to hear from that experience because at first sight it could seem similar to startups specifically. There's a lot of glamour as well, where it takes a lot of time for things to materialize. I'll end with one last one, going back to more yourselves and your journeys. In the last 5 years, what new habit or belief or behavior has most improved your life?
It's a nice one. Maybe I'll start, Jad, if you don't mind. For me, it was be mindful of being present. At one point, I realized that when I was with clients, I was on the phone with another client or looking at emails or like texting friends or texting family. When I was then at home, I was like following up what was happening at a different stage. And I realized that when I feel the most fulfilled, I add the most value is when I can actually be present. And it's totally doable. If I sit with my wife for dinner, yeah, sometimes I find myself like on the phone and she's like, what are you doing? Like, leave it there for a little bit. No, she's also an ex-consultant, so I think we both come from the same school. But nothing happens if we like pause for like 30 minutes for 1 hour. And if it's urgent, they will reach out to us. But for me, that specific action of being there, of being focused, of being present, it really changed and made things way better.
I think that's actually one of the questions we had gotten on. That answers a lot of how do you deal with some of the stress, and it's a lot about zoning out, tuning out distractions when you're doing something. Jad?
Look, a lot of things have, it's amazing how when I look back about the things, but one thing, if I want to highlight is this being your own worst judge, being too demanding ends up leading to depletion. So this is something in the last few years where I needed to accept that setting a certain level of excellence was not leading to better outcomes. It was leading to negative impact all around, especially around me. So I had to accept that I'm not one that can set levels of standard. There are others, and it's negotiable.
Mhm. Thank you, Jad. I just want to take one question that's for you, Jad, or from Suhail in the chat. And before we wrap up, he says, "Thank you so much for this. My question is for Jad. On passion, do you mean being passionate about consulting in general, or emphasizing on 1 to 2 specific practice areas on skills and interests? For example, when looking out for entry-level roles on a website, would you rather wait for the right practice area or join any entry-level role in general to get an early head start in consulting?"
Yeah, I can. What I'm reading in this question is we're focusing on the technical. Passion cannot be technical. Passion is passion, and it's not about one thing. It's about being passionate. It's being driven, having the energy, and being positive. So even in an environment where I would say you're fully constrained, let's assume you're somebody who's passionate about healthcare and you really don't like the energy sector, and you're deployed on a project in the energy sector, you still need, and this is where being passionate, you find it in yourself to still come in every morning and being part of a team and delivering to the utmost quality. This is what passion is for me. This is what I meant by passion. It's not about liking something. It's just something within you.
Excellent.
I hope
Excellent.
I answered the question.
I think you did. I think what really resonates today that's maybe different than what people might expect at this level is a lot of long-term, it takes a lot of long-term thinking that stems in almost every answer rather than the next project or the next year, and constantly having to expand the time horizon, and a lot of much more vulnerability than in the discussion and it's really welcome. I think it's really fresh. I think that's the reason I would say people still choose consulting over maybe investment banking or finance that still has ways to go before we get to that. But I won't take more of your time. I think this has been an amazing first session into having more career discussions and with a lot of impact on some of your personal stories. And I cannot stress how grateful I am that you're sharing all these personal stories. I think it will make it more appealing and inform more people around their consulting journey. So thanks again, and we'll be sending out some of this recording for the people that missed it. And if you want to connect with us on LinkedIn, I think the 3 of us are on it. If you want to have a follow-up with any of the topics we discussed,
please do. Mark, thanks so much for inviting us. Javier, good to meet you.
Thank you
everyone
both.
who attended. Bye, guys.
thank you guys.
And thank you to the Sarwa team for organizing.
Pleasure. Thank you both. Bye bye.